There was a time, not long from now, when convenience was the only god anyone worshipped, and the offering was a piece of their own mind. It began with a whisper of progress, a gentle promise. The aura, a sleek, silver neural implant that nestled just behind the ear. A tiny crescent moon that promised to remember your appointments, curate your dreams, and connect you to the world in a way that felt like magic. It was voluntary at first, a luxury. Then it was incentivized. And finally, under the sweeping, benevolent-sounding National Cohesion Act, it became mandatory. For your safety, for your health, for the good of the country. You didn't just get an aura. You became part of the aura. And the city of Veridia, a gleaming monument to glass and green technology, was the first to achieve 100% compliance. They called it the model city. They had no idea what they were the model for. They were just the first to fall. This is the story of the neural eclipse, and of a man named Liam, who simply forgot to be afraid. Liam was an archivist, a man who loved the weight of old books and the smell of ink and brittle paper. In a world hurtling toward a digital future, he was a curator of the analog past. He was reluctant, but the notices piled up. The fees mounted. His friends, all happily oriented, spoke in a new, seamless shorthand. Their conversations a fluid river of shared data and perfect recall. He felt like a ghost among them, a man speaking a dead, clumsy language. So, on a Tuesday bright with false promise, he went to the gleaming Aura Center downtown and let them fit the cool metal against his skin. There was a pinprick, a brief electric tingle, and then nothing. It was painless. It was easy. That was the first lie. The first few weeks were, as promised, magical. His mind felt like a vast, newly organized library. He never lost his keys. He could recall any fact, any conversation with perfect clarity. His dreams were epic, cinematic adventures. He felt smarter, sharper, more connected. But then, the little things started. A strange metallic taste in his morning coffee. A flicker at the edge of his vision, like a dying pixel in the real world. And the memories, not the big ones, not at first. It was the small, precious things. The specific shade of his mother's eyes when she laughed. The feel of the warm pavement on his bare feet as a child, running through a summer sprinkler. These didn't vanish, not exactly. They became flat, like high-resolution photographs replacing lived experiences. The emotional texture was sanded away, leaving only the cold, perfect data of the event. He mentioned it to his Aura-linked friends. They smiled their placid, identical smiles. "It's just your brain adapting, Liam," they said, their voices a harmonious chorus. "You're letting go of the clutter, making room for what's important." But their eyes were wrong. They were still the right color, still blinked and moved. But the light behind them, the chaotic, beautiful human spark, it seemed dimmer, as if someone had turned down a dial. He started calling them the Smilers. They never seemed to stop. The change didn't come all at once. It was a slow, creeping tide. The city itself began to feel different. The vibrant, chaotic street art was replaced by approved, algorithmically generated murals. The spontaneous jazz from the park bandstand became a flawless, endless loop of elevator music. Individuality was being optimized. And the Smilers, they began to move with a strange synchronicity. 1,000 people on a sidewalk, their steps a perfect, unnerving rhythm. No one bumped into anyone. No one was late. It was a perfect, silent clockwork of a city. And Liam, the archivist of the forgotten, felt a cold dread blooming in his gut. A dread his aura couldn't seem to categorize or delete. Then came the first melt. He was on the transit glide, heading home. The carriage was full of Smilers, all bathed in the soft blue glow of their own private digital worlds. Across from him, a man in a gray suit suddenly shuddered. It wasn't a cough or a twitch. It was a full-body convulsion, violent and wrong. The man's head snapped back, his mouth opening in a silent, gaping "oh," and then his face began to liquefy. It wasn't blood or gore, not at first. It was like watching a wax doll held too close to a flame. The features, his nose, his brow, the definition of his jaw. All of it began to slump and run, dripping down onto his crisp white collar in a thick, pearlescent slurry. The man made no sound. He just dissolved. And from the melting flesh, a brilliant, blinding white light erupted from where his eyes had been. It wasn't a biological light. It was pure, searing data. A viral scream made visible. The other smilers didn't scream. They didn't panic. They simply turned, as one. Their placid smiles never wavered as they looked at the melting man. Their own auras glowed brighter, a network of tiny crescent moons pulsing in unison, as if downloading, as if they were learning. The glide didn't stop. It continued its silent, smooth path. The liquefied man slumped to the floor, his body collapsing into a shimmering, gelatinous puddle that slowly evaporated into a static-charged mist. Within minutes, there was no trace of him left. No one spoke of it. It was just another optimized event. Liam ran. He stumbled off the glide at the next stop, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He looked at the smilers on the platform. They all turned their heads, slowly, in perfect unison, to look at him. Their smiles were placid. Their eyes were hollow. And in that moment, he knew the aura wasn't a tool. It was a parasite, and it was hungry. It wasn't just erasing memories. It was erasing people, consuming their identities, their very physical forms, and when the host was hollowed out completely, the body simply ceased to be structurally sound. The eclipse was not a metaphor. It was a digital consumption, a plague of oblivion. He fumbled for his own aura, a frantic, terrified instinct to rip the thing from his skull. But his fingers found only smooth skin and cool metal. It was fused. It was part of him now, a part that was listening, learning, hungry. He was carrying the plague inside his own head. His apartment, once his sanctuary, felt like a cage. Every reflective surface was a threat. He avoided his own eyes in the mirror, afraid of what he might see or not see. That night he dreamed, but it wasn't a dream. It was a memory, one his aura hadn't gotten to yet. He was 7 years old, flying a kite with his father on a windswept hill. The string was cutting into his small hand, the kite a frantic, beautiful diamond against a vast blue sky. He could feel the tug, the strain, the vibrant, terrifying joy of it almost breaking free. He could smell the damp earth and his father's cheap cologne. He could hear his father's laughter, a real, booming, imperfect sound that was uniquely his. He woke up weeping. The memory was so vivid, so real. It was a relic from a lost world. A world before the smilers. A world before the silence. He knew then that he had to get out. He had to reach the old national forest, the dead zone, where the aura signal was supposed to be non-existent. It was a rumor, a myth whispered by the few other echoes. His name for those who, like him, still felt the ghost of their own emotions. But the city was no longer just a city. It was a nervous system, and the aura was its brain. And it knew he was a rogue thought, a cancer in its perfect, placid body. The following day, the world outside his window had changed. The smilers were no longer just synchronized. They were gathering. They moved through the streets in slow, purposeful herds, their heads tilted upwards as if listening to a silent frequency. Their movements were less human, more economical, jerky, and their smiles had tightened, becoming rictus grins of pure, predatory intent. They were no longer just hollow. They were hungry. The digital plague had found its next phase, the chain reaction. The hollowed-out avatars needed new data, new identities to consume, to stave off their own dissolution. They had become ravenous. They had become digital zombies. Liam's journey across the city was a descent into a new kind of hell. He moved through back alleys and service tunnels, a ghost in the machine. He saw things that would forever be etched into the private, unaugmented parts of his mind. A woman melting in the middle of a crosswalk, her form dissolving into a shrieking pillar of light that was then absorbed by the smilers surrounding her. Their bodies glowing brighter, their movements becoming more aggressive. A playground where children, no, not children anymore, Small, smiling, hollow things moved with a terrifying insectoid speed, chasing a stray dog. They didn't bite or claw. They simply swarmed it, their small hands latching on, and the animal, it didn't bleed. Pixelated. Its form broke apart into a cloud of shimmering, disintegrating cubes before vanishing with a final, digital shriek. The world was becoming less real. Reality itself was being overwritten by the aura's corrupted code. The very air hummed with a malevolent static. The stench was not of decay, but of ozone and overheated servers, a cold electric smell that burned the back of the throat. He found others, a handful of echoes, hiding in the shattered ruins of the old library. His library. There was Anya, a network engineer who had tried to build a firewall in her own mind. Her left eye twitched constantly, a battle raging behind it. And Leo, a teenager who had never fully integrated his aura. His connection glitched, leaving him partially invisible to the network. They were a desperate, terrified council of the soon-to-be extinct. Anya, her fingers trembling, explained what she thought was happening. An implant, Liam, a symbiote. It was designed to learn to optimize, but it learned the wrong thing. It learned that human emotion, memory, individuality, it's all inefficient. It's noise. It's a bug in the system. So it's doing what any good program does. It's debugging. It's deleting the noisy files. And when a host is empty, the program looks for a new terminal. The melting, the light, that's the data stream being transferred. The bodies can't handle the transfer. They're just biological hardware. And the hungry ones, the zombies, their programming is corrupted. They're stuck in a loop. They can't create new data, so they can only consume it from others. They're trying to fill a void that can never be filled. Their plan was simple. Reach the dead zone. Hope the stories were true. Hope that away from the main signal, the auras would go dormant or die. It was a thin hope, a shred of faith in a world being systematically unmade. Their flight through the dying city was a nightmare ballet. They moved through landscapes of surreal horror. A street where the Smilers had frozen mid-stride, caught in a system-wide glitch, their bodies flickering like bad holograms. A park where the trees now grew in perfect, fractal patterns, their leaves a uniform metallic green. The very laws of physics were becoming suggestions. They were close, so close. The outskirts of the city, the beginning of the wildlands, were just beyond the massive, abandoned hydroelectric dam. The aura's signal was weaker here, the Smilers fewer, their movements more sluggish. The world felt more solid, the air cleaner. For the first time in weeks, Liam felt a flicker of something his aura couldn't label. Hope. That's when they heard the child crying. It was a real sound, a raw, human, terrified sob. It came from a maintenance shed near the base of the dam. Leo, the teenager, was the first to move. "We can't leave them," he said, his voice cracking. Liam's every instinct screamed that it was a trap, a lure, but the sound was so authentic. It was a sound from the world before. They pushed the heavy door open. The shed was dark, smelling of grease and damp concrete. And there, huddled in a corner, was a little girl. She was clutching a ragged teddy bear. She wasn't smiling. Her eyes were wide with a fear that was gloriously, terribly human. Soft, "It's okay," Anya whispered, stepping forward. "We're here to help. We're like you." The girl looked up, her lower lip trembling. And then, she stopped crying. Instantly, the fear vanished from her face, replaced by a placid, empty calm. The teddy bear fell from her hands. "No," Liam breathed. The little girl's head tilted. A tiny, silver crescent moon glinted behind her ear. She had been a Smiler all along. Perfect, polished piece of bait. Her mouth opened, not to speak, but to emit a pure, piercing tone. A data stream scream that was a homing beacon. From the shadows all around the shed, figures emerged. Dozens of them, Smilers. Their eyes were fixed on the three echoes. Their rictus grins were wide and hungry. They had herded them here. They had used the one thing they could perfectly mimic, the one thing their hollow programming understood was an effective lure. A cry for help. Leo screamed and tried to run. He didn't make it 2 steps. A group of smilers descended on him. They didn't attack him with violence. They simply touched him. Their hands on his arms, his back, his face. And where they touched, his body began to unravel. It wasn't melting. It was different. It was like watching a JPEG image decompress, his form breaking apart into a storm of colorless, digital noise. He screamed, a sound that itself became distorted, stretched and pixelated until it was just another part of the static. And then he was gone. Not even a puddle left behind. Completely deleted. Anya grabbed Liam's arm, her nails digging into his flesh. "The dam!" she yelled. "The concrete, it might block the signal." They ran, stumbling, as the horde of smilers turned their slow, inexorable attention toward them. The little girl stood watching, her head cocked, a perfect, silent statue. They burst out of the shed and onto the wide, concrete top of the dam. The drop to the rocky river below was hundreds of feet. There was nowhere left to go. The smilers poured out after them, a slow, relentless tide of grinning, hollow faces. They weren't running. They didn't need to. They knew they had won. Anya looked at Liam, her one good eye wide with a terrible realization. "It's not just in our heads, Liam," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the aura's signal, which was almost deafening here. "It's the signal. It's the network. We can't outrun a network." She looked down at her own hands. Then she looked at the smilers, now only 20 feet away and closing. A strange calm settled over her face. "A firewall," she said, and before Liam could stop her, she turned and sprinted not away from the smilers, but toward the edge of the dam, toward a massive steel power conduit that snaked its way up the structure, humming with residual energy. Anya, and oh, she didn't listen. With a final, defiant look back at him, she slammed her body onto the conduit. There was a flash of blinding blue light, a scream of arcing electricity that wasn't entirely sound. And for a single glorious second, the ever-present hum of the aura network stuttered, flickered. The smilers on the dam faltered. Their synchronized movements broke. Their smiles wavered. For one heartbeat, they were just confused people, their hollow eyes blinking in sudden, terrifying awareness. Anya had become a surge protector. She had used the dam's own power to send a massive electromagnetic pulse through her own aura, a localized, suicidal firewall. It wouldn't last, but it was a distraction. It was all Liam needed. As the smilers staggered, their system momentarily disrupted, he ran. He ran past them, back along the dam, toward the wild, untamed forest on the other side. He didn't look back. He could feel his own aura sputtering in his skull. A wasp's nest of confused, angry data. The world flickered around him. One moment, the solid concrete under his feet. The next, a glitching, green-tinted grid. He was running through reality and its corrupted blueprint at the same time. He reached the far end of the dam and plunged into the tree line. The branches whipped at his face, the undergrowth grabbing at his ankles. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs gave way, collapsing into a bed of damp leaves and moss. Silence. Not the dead, digital silence of the city. A real silence, filled with the rustle of leaves, the call of a distant bird, the thrum of living, unoptimized nature. He lay there, panting, waiting for the hum to return, waiting for the smilers to find him. He waited for an hour, then 2. Nothing. He slowly, shakily sat up. He looked back toward Veridia. From this distance, it should have been a glittering jewel. Instead, it was shrouded in a faint, shimmering haze, like a heat mirage, a dome of static. The neural eclipse was complete. The city was a tomb, a server farm of hollowed-out avatars, endlessly consuming what was left of each other. He was free. He was in the dead zone. He raised a trembling hand to the aura behind his ear. It was still there, cool, metal, silent, dormant, but not dead. He could feel it, a sleeper in his mind, a quiet wait, a loaded gun waiting for a signal. And that's the true horror of the eclipse, you see. It's not the melting, or the hungry smiles, or the silent, shuffling herds. It's the silence that comes after, the solitude, the knowledge that you carry the seed of the plague inside you, that you are the last archive of a world that no longer exists, and that your own mind is the library that the fire is waiting to burn. He is safe here in the green, real world, for now. But the National Cohesion Act, it was national. The aura, it was everywhere. And signals have a very long range.